Well, we're back at reading this wonderful book called A Journey Out of the Body, Robert A. Monroe is the author, and we are now on chapter 4, Here Now. The Here Now. This world's crazy, and I can't say much. One of the most common questions that arises during any discussion of the second body and the second state is, where do we go in evaluation of the experiments? There evolved what seem to be 3 second states of environments. First of these was identified as local, I guess is that 1 or local 1? For lack of a better nomenclature. More appropriately, it could be called the here and now. Local 1 is the most believable. It consists of people and places that actually do exist in the material, well-known world at the very moment of the experiment. It is the world represented to us by our physical senses, which most of us are fairly sure does exist. Visits to local 1 while in the second body should not contain strange beings, events, or places, unfamiliar perhaps, but not strange and unknown. If the latter is the case, then perception is distorted. Thus it is that the only evidential results provable by standard methods of confirmation have taken place while moving about via the second body in local 1, or locale 1. All of the experiments in chapter 3 were made in locale 1. Even so, these and others in the same category are pitifully few in proportion to all the recorded experiments. On the surface, it seems quite simple. Get out of physical and into the second, and then go visit George and make contact. Come back into the physical and report nothing to it. If only it were that easy. Yet, the factors present that make it difficult are recognizable. Recognition of a problem presumes an eventual solution one way or the other, and perhaps it will be so in this field. Let us take first the factors of direction and identification. Suppose, for example, fully conscious and in your physical body, you were able to soar through the air rather than walk on the ground and ride it in a car. You discovered the ability and decided to fly over George's house to demonstrate how it works. Your house and your laboratory is on the outskirts of a large city. George lives in the subdivision on the other side of town. On a Sunday afternoon, you start off. Naturally, you rise high in the air so as to avoid obstacles of trees, buildings, etc. Uncertain, you don't go too high. You want to be able to recognize landmarks which might be difficult to see from 5,000 feet. Therefore, you stay low, about 100 feet off the ground. Now, which way to go? You look for points of familiarity. It is at that moment you realize you have a problem. You don't have a compass course to George's house, and it wouldn't do you any good if you did. You don't have a compass. Undaunted, you decide to cut across the city using familiar buildings and streets as guideposts. You have driven the route many times, so you should find your way easily. You start off over houses and streets, and almost immediately you become confused. The familiar has suddenly become unfamiliar. You look back and you have difficulty finding your own house even at close range. It takes a moment to realize why this is so. You have been earthbound and your entire point of view has been from the level of less than 6 feet. Most of the time, we habitually look straight ahead and downward. Only occasionally do we look up, and when something attracts our attention. Even such an upward-looking angle of vision has little relationship with looking down from 100 feet. How long would it take you to recognize your home if you were shown a photograph taken from directly overhead? The same applies to all familiar surroundings, streets, buildings, cities, and people. We may get to George's house, but it will take you may get to George's house, but it will take you a long time. You may not identify it from a distance of 50 feet because you know only the appearance of the front of his house, and you approach it from the back. It is not a feeling peculiar to you. Pilots of aircraft, their attention diverted from a moment, have become lost within 2 miles of an airport when flying at low level in bright daylight. For a moment, everything below is completely unfamiliar. Only navigational instruments can bring the quick orientation needed. It is easy to see how this problem can be compounded when your friend George lives in another city some distance away where you have never visited, when you have not seen pictures of the house. Of course, if he painted a fluorescent yellow X on a roof with a 10 million candle power beacon of light with a similar markers on the streets and highways along the route, you might make it. Now let's take the same trip and the second body and examine it comparatively. Again, you are overhead 100 feet floating in the air, this time with no physical body. It is a bright sunny day, but your seeing is somewhat impaired. You still are now fully accustomed to the technique of how you are seeing. As a result, your vision is distorted in one way or another. You can work your way slowly from over your home to George's house, much as you would if in physical body. It would be the same slow process under less favorable visible conditions. There is a better, faster way, happily. There seems to be a built-in directional senses if their use can be mastered. The if is the catch. As noted elsewhere, you think of the person at the end of your destination, never a place but a person, and use the method prescribed. In a few moments, you are there. You can watch the landscape move around you if you wish, but it's a little disconcerting when you rush out headlong towards a building or tree and go right through it. In order to avoid such traumas, forget about seeing during the traveling process. You never quite get over the physical body conditioning that such things are solid. At least I have not. I still have a tendency to move in the direction of the door to leave, only to realize again the situation when in my second body hand goes through the doorknob. Irritated with myself, I then dive through the wall rather than the door to reinforce my awareness of the second state characteristics. In conjunction with this convenient homing instinct that is unaffected by distance, you are faced with a further problem, which is that the automatic navigational system is too accurate. It works by what and whom you think. Let one small stray thought emerge dominantly from just 1 microsecond and your course is deviated. And to this, the fact of your conscious mind may be in conflict with the superconscious as to what should be the destination, and you can begin to appreciate why so many experiments are produced. Locale 1 evidential data have ended in failure, and it sometimes causes one to ponder how there have been any such results when the difficulties are considered. As an experiment, try to concentrate for just 1 minute upon a single action or event or thing which you dislike emotionally and intellectually. The superconscious expressing it will without the intrusion of any unrelated thought. It takes something more than practice, as you will discover. Here are some examples of misdirection caused by an interpreting thought taken from the notes. 4/12/63, late afternoon, temp 40s, humidity low, barometer high. Utilize countdown technique. Warm sensation surged in a 31 count. Disassociated easily on her plan to visit a friend. Used stretched out method. Seemed to travel unusually long for a 3-mile trip. Then stopped, looked to see where I was, and found I was sitting on the edge of the roof of a 2-story house with what seemed to be the backyard below me. There was a woman working in the yard with a broom in her hand. As I watched, she turned and walked into the house. Just as she was about to enter, something made her look up directly at me. With a frightened start, she scuttles into the house. Slamming the door, I felt that I should leave. Embarrassed at having frightened the woman, I used the physical moment return signal and came back easily, entering the physical without difficulty. Time away 7 minutes and 10 seconds. Comment. Wonder what she saw sitting on the eave. Also, why this destination? Eventually, concentration failure again. 6/29/60, late evening, temp 70s, humidity medium, barometer average, physically tired, below flow surge, came at hold off point before sleep. Under plan to visit Dr. Dredgy Puharich, somewhere in California. Moved blindly for a start period, then stopped. 4 people were seated around a table, 3 men and a boy about 11. Obviously not Dr. Puharich. Unless unusual situation, I asked where they were, what was the location, town and state. There was no answer to my inquiry. I sensed weariness and caution on their parts. I asked again, and the boy turned and evidently was about to reply when one of the men said, "Don't tell him." Eventually, they were afraid of me for some reason. I apologized for my nervousness and explained I was still new to the non-physical business, turned and left, not wishing to make them uncomfortable. Returned to physical, uneventful, time away, 18 minutes. Comment, no connection with Dr. Pahorich's activities at the time, as he reports. Wrong destination again, no validation possible. Why does my presence create such fear? This inability to control destination has been and still remains a chief barrier to the production of consistency and reliability. The result of such attempts have wrought many intrusions similar to above, and many follow a similar pattern. Here is one that brought eventual data, although the person involved were and are unaware of their participation. 11:27:62 morning, temperature 40 degrees, humidity medium, barometer below average, physically rested. Went into relaxation countdown. Used sex center mental pattern with oral breathing to create condition. Used peel off to get out of body, just as if outer layer of physical were being removed. Then free and floating in room. Plan was to go to Agnew, Boston. Started trip slowly to observe surrounding as much as possible. Went slowly through the west wall, feeling texture of each layer of material wall. Then into another room, furnished as a living room. Then into a third room and another living room, all unoccupied. Speed became faster. Nothing was visible but gray-black blur. Still concentrating on Mr. Boston, finally stopped. Was in a normal-sized room, bedroom, with 3 people in it. There was a large bed to the right, and 2 adults lay on it. A little girl about 5 or 6 was sitting on the floor beside the bed to the left of it. The little girl looked directly at me and said excitedly, "I know what you are." I turned to her as gently and warmly as I could, so as not to frighten her, and said, "You do? Good. What am I?" And she was not at all afraid when she said, "You're an astral projection." She may have used another term such as a ghost, but it was definite understanding on her part, one way or another. I asked her where she lived and what year it was, but she couldn't give me an answer, so I turned to the 2 in the bed and tried to be careful to avoid making them afraid and nervous, but it was obvious that they were. I asked them what year it was, but they didn't seem to understand. No time concept in the superconscious. I concentrated on the man and asked his name and where he lived. He replied nervously, "Move away," as he became more disturbed. I looked at the window for an area identification. Outside the window was a small roof, such as a porch. Beyond was a street with many trees and grassy island strip in the middle. There was a car parked at the curb, a dark-colored sedan. I sensed a need to return to the physical and turn back to the 3 people and asked if they would like to see me take off. The little girl was eager, and the 2 adults appeared relieved. I used stretch technique, shot through the ceiling, and returned to the physical without problems. Reason for recall: throat dry from oral breathing. Time away 42 minutes. Comment: through a check by phone, I have located this family at the address which the man gave me. Would it be appropriate to visit them physically on some pretext? From this, it could be seen that a much more extensive and organized effort would be required for massive validation of second body activities in locale 1. Number 1, I guess, would be one subject and several assorted scientists, physicists, scientists, and psychiatrists are not enough. Also, it can be noted that unexpected visits to unprepared persons can't be helped, at this stage of control. Perhaps much could be gained if such people could be interviewed as to what they saw and felt at the time of the intrusion. The difficulty lies in locating these people. It is the exception that enough data is obtained to identify the place visited as the above. Also, it is interesting when possible to determine the inconsistencies of observation of locale 1 activities while in second state, except in unusual instances. Most visual input registers in shading of black and white. This seems true under any lighting conditions. However, strong light and shadow creates wrong perception. For example, a strong light reflects from the dark hair of an old man brings the impression that he is blonde rather than dark. For example, from the notes. 5/5/61, temperature 60 degrees, humidity high, barometer medium, physical neutral. After dinner, early evening, in the planned attempt to visit Dr. Puhovich, used breathing jaw technique for relaxation. Obtained vibration state after some difficulty via 90. I don't know if that's a 90 degrees or is that a dot. 90 reach out technique. That would be 90 degrees. I don't know if that's is that a dot on my screen and then just for anyways. Applied a simple mental lift out and concentrated mental desire to visit Dr. Puhovich. After a short trip, stopped in room. There was a long and narrow table with several chairs and bookshelves. There was a man sitting at the table, writing on paper. He resembled Dr. Puhovich, but he was more light and blonde-haired. I greeted him, and he looked up and smiled, then stated that he would spend more time on our project, apologizing for being so neglectful. I said I understood, then felt uneasiness to return to the physical and explained I had to leave. He stated that he realized my need for caution, and I turned and quickly headed back to the physical. Re-entered without difficulty with right arm circulation down from lying on it awkwardly, which was evident reason for recall. Comment. And checking with Dr. Puhovich, the locale was right. The actions were correct, but he has no memory of the visit. Strong overhead light may have caused the reflection of blonde. And the preceding also illustrates the problem of communication. Dr. Puhovich, awake and aware that specific attempts to visit him were being made, had no conscious recollection of any such meeting. All other factors checked accurately, except for the reported conversation. This has happened so frequently in such instances that it became a source of much discussion. At first it was suggested that I was fantasizing these communications. It seemed probable that in so doing I was merely calling upon my knowledge of the visitee at an unconscious level to create an authentic conversation. These theories received a setback when a number of such communications brought out data known only to the second party. Still, another difficulty of locale 1 travel lies in the time factor. Inconveniently, the best periods for deep relaxation so necessary to create the second state occur late at night. Therefore, it is quite natural to take advantage of such instances when possible. Less effort is required and the separation is much more rapid. However, the physiological and psychological conditions that help induce the state are unpredictable and not known fully. This inconsistency brought numerous occasions when experimentation for purely evidential data ended in failure. The person to be visited was performing no reportable action other than lying in bed sound asleep. These were discounted completely as evidence. Most people perform this act every night. Similarly, attempts at validation during daylight hours brought their share of complications. With no promise of contact at a specific minute or hour, most people involved went about their normal affairs. Thus, when such visits were made, they were not necessarily discovered in a unique or unusual act or condition. As a result, the small, normally inconsequential acts observed during these visits often were but vague memories to the contactee when confirmation was needed. We have a great tendency to forget details of routine actions in life. We can prove this. You can prove this yourself. Simply attempt to recall precisely the details of what you were doing at, and say, 3:23 yesterday afternoon. If it was a routine task, chances are you will remember only the doing, if that much. Exact detail will escape you. Yet the experimentation in visiting locale 1 is extremely important, perhaps at the moment more so than anything else can be attempted. For only through eventual visits in locale 1 can significant evidential data on second body and second state be obtained, sufficient, that is, to bring about serious study by authoritative scientific groups of our time. Only through such concentrated and extensive study can a breakthrough of a revolutionary nature be obtained as regard to second body and applied to the basic knowledge of man. Anything less, it will remain an unsolved enigma at best, and at worst a ridiculed and unacceptable fantasy to both philosopher and scientist. For this reason, the recurring theme in the reports of experiments is get evidential data. Here then is a later experiment in locale 1 performed in the EEG laboratory of a hospital of a major university campus. Experiment number EEG5, July 19th, 1966. There's that date again. Arrived at the hospital EEG lab at 9 p.m. after driving several miles from Richmond. No particular sense of fatigue, sleepiness early in the day around 1 p.m., but no rest was taken. Active day from around 6:30 in the morning. By 9:30 in the evening, all electrodes had been attached by the technician, who was the only person present when I arrived. I reclined on a temporary cot in a semi-darkened room, using a pillow and sheet, no shirt, but retaining trousers. Experienced unusual difficulty in getting head comfortable, especially the ear pressed against the pillow. As a side sleeper, it made no difference which side. Each was equally uncomfortable due to the electrodes attached to my ears. After a semblance of ease, I attempted to relax naturally, but was unsuccessful. I went finally into a fractional relaxation pattern. Count up from number 1 associating each number with a body part. Started with feet, fixed closed eyes, and direction of the body part as a number, and mentally commanded to relax where thought. Experience usual mind drift at various points and force attention back to relaxation technique. Went through an entire sequence without complete relaxation, so I started again at the beginning. After about 46 minutes of this, with attaining a full relaxation, I decided to take a break. Sat up halfway and called to the electrician. I sat up, apparently, I sat partially, smoked a cigarette, talked with the technician for about 5-8 minutes, then decided to try it again. After some time spent attempting to ease ear electrode discomfort, concentrated on ear to numb it with partial success, then went into a fractional relaxation technique. Again, halfway through the second time around the pattern, a sense of warmth appeared with full consciousness, or so it seemed remaining. I decided to try the rollout method, i.e. start to turn over gently, just as if you were turning over in bed. Using the physical body, I started to feel as if I were turning, and at first thought I truly was moving the physical body. I felt myself roll off the edge of the cot, braced for a fall to the floor. When I didn't hit immediately, I knew that I had separated. I moved away from the physical and through a darkened area, then came upon 2 men and woman. The seeing wasn't too good, but got better as I came closer. The woman, tall, dark-haired, in her 40s, was sitting on a love seat or couch. Seated on the right of her was one man. In front of her, and slightly to the left, was the second man. They all were strangers to me and were in conversation which I could not hear. I tried to get their attention, but could not. Finally, I reached over and pinched the woman very gently on her left side, just below the rib cage. It seemed to get a reaction, but still no communication. I decided to return to the physical for orientation and start again. Back into the physical was achieved simply by thought of return. Opened physical eyes, all was fine. Swelled to wetten my dry throat. Closed my eyes, let the warmth surge up, then used the same rollout technique. This time I let myself float into the floor beside the cot. I fell slowly and could feel myself passing through the various EEG wires on the way down. I touched the floor slightly, and then could see the light coming through the open doorway to the outer EEG room. Careful to keep local, I went under the cot, keeping in slight touch with the floor and floating in horizontal position, fingertips touching the floor to keep in position. I went slowly through the doorway. I was looking I hear a flute. I hear a flute. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. That was actually an ice cream truck, and it's October the 25th. What is an ice cream truck doing out? I guess this is like the Indian summer's the last warm spell, so I lost total concentration on this. Because I'm like, what? That's like, where did that come from? I had the windows open because I took out the AC, so I have to go through the next 3 days of high 70s, which might not be bad for you, but for me it is. Once I get about 75 degrees, my body starts falling apart. It's weird. Don't ever get MS. And how I got it was from this jibby jab. So, and back in 2009, when everything about my life changed. I was in the right direction, and I lost everything again. And it's been that way ever since. It's been having a struggle. Anyways, where we at this back, the physical cheat, each day, careful to keep local. I went under the cot and kept this. Okay. Back into the physical was achieved simply by thought of return. Open the physical eyes, all was fine, swallowed wet my dry throat, close my eyes, let warmth surge up, and then use the same rollout technique. This time I let myself float to the floor beside the cot, fell slowly, could feel myself passing through the various EEG wires. On the way down, I touched the floor slightly, then could see the light coming through the open doorway to the outer EEG room. Careful to keep local. I went under the cot, kept a slight touch with the floor, and floating in the horizontal position, fingertips touching the floor to keep in position. I went slowly through the doorway. I was looking for the technician but could not find her. She was not in the room to the right, control console room. I went out into the brightly lit outer room. I looked in all directions, and suddenly there she was. However, she was not alone. A man was with her, standing on her left as she faced me. I tried to attract her attention and was almost immediately rewarded with a burst of warm joy and happiness that I found had finally achieved the thing we had been working for. She was truly excited and excitedly embraced me. I responded. Only slight sexual overtones were present, which I was nearly able to disregard. After a moment, I pulled back and gently put my hands on her face, on each cheek, and thanked her for her help. However, there was no direct, intelligent, objective communication with her other than the above. None was tried. I was too excited to finally achieving the separation and stay local. I then turned to the man, who was about her height, with curly hair, some of which dropped over the side of his forehead. I tried to attract his attention, but was unable to do so. Again, reluctantly, I decided to pinch her gently, which I did. It did not evoke any response that I noticed. Feeling something calling for a return to the physical, I swung around and went through the door and slipped easily back into the physical. Reason for discomfort: dry throat and throbbing ear. After checking to see that the integration was complete, that I felt normal in all parts of the body. I opened my eyes, sat up, and called the technician. She came in, and I told her that I had made it finally, that I had seen her, however, with a man. She replied that it was her husband. I asked if he was outside. She replied that he was, that he came to stay with her during these late hours. I asked why I hadn't seen her before. She replied that it was policy for no outsiders to see subjects or patients. I expressed the desire to meet him, to which she acceded. The technician removed electrodes, and I went outside with her and meet her husband. He was about her height, curly hair, and after several conversations, conversational amenities, I left. I did not query the technician or her husband as to anything they saw, noticed, or felt. However, my impression was that he definitely was the man I had observed with her during the non-physical activity. My second impression was that she was not in council room when I visited them, but in another room, standing up with him. This may be hard to determine if there is a firm role that the technician is supposed to always stay at the council if she can be convinced that the truth is more important in this case. Perhaps the second aspect could be validated. Only supporting evidence other than what might have appeared on the EEG lies in the presence of her husband, of which I was unaware prior to the experiment. This later fact can be verified by the technician. Important aftermath. In a report to Dr. Tart, the technician confirmed that she was in the outer hall with her husband at the time of the incident separation. She also confirmed that I did not know he was present and that I had not met him previously. Dr. Tart states that the EEG shows definite, unusual, and unique tracings during the time of activity. And that's the end of chapter 4.